I am Babla Jonathan, and this is the 6 p.m. primetime newscast on Equinoxe Television, live from our headquarters in Cameroon's economic capital, dwelling our top stories. In this edition of the news, the Center for Human Rights and Democracy in Africa documents human rights violations and abuse in the restive Anglophone northwest and southwest regions of the Republic of Cameroon between October 2020 and February 2021. In its latest report, the organization details atrocities committed against the population by security and defense forces on one hand and non-state armed groups on the other hand. We'll give you details in this edition of the news on Equinoxe Television. Also in this edition of the news, we bring to you the fascinating story of two persons living with disabilities as a couple. You hear that story in this edition of the news. And out of the country, gunmen are reported to have killed at least 13 persons in the latest attack on a school in Zamfara, northwestern Nigeria. Thank you for joining us on this edition of the news. We begin with human rights news, notably in the northwest and southwest regions of the Republic of Cameroon, the two English-speaking regions of the country hit by socio-political and security tensions for more than 4 years today. And the Center for Human Rights and Democracy in Africa has been closely following up happenings in those two regions. In its latest report, it details atrocities allegedly committed by members of the security and defense forces of the Republic of Cameroon on one hand and non-state armed groups on the other hand between October 2020 and February 2021. The human rights officer of the Center for Human Rights and Democracy in Africa spoke to us. Take a listen.
Center for Human Rights and Democracy in Africa. This evening, we just issued a report on the human rights situation of the northwest and southwest regions of Cameroon. And this report details atrocities committed against the civilian population by the defense and security forces on one hand and the non-state actors on the other hand. This report focuses on events from October 2020 to February 2021. And some of these atrocities include, among others, extrajudicial executions, arbitrary arrests and illegal detentions, retaliatory attacks, the use of improvised explosive devices, torture, wanton destruction of property. We also documented cases of attacks against schools and arson of homes and villages, as well as abductions and kidnappings. In the report, we also shed light on some of the actions of the international community and their recommendations on how to resolve the crisis in Cameroon, and we ended with recommendations to the stakeholders on how to ensure accountability, justice as a step towards finding a solution to the crisis in Cameroon. This report enumerated atrocities which have been affecting women and children seriously, and we gave recommendations on how the government can do to resolve the crisis in Cameroon. And one of the recommendations is the fact that there must be accountability for the crimes which have already been committed, and we commended the government for the actions they took by investigating the Ngabu massacre, which identified 3 soldiers, and these soldiers are under trial for killing at least 21 unarmed civilians. And we recommended to the government to ensure that every other atrocity that has been committed in the crisis should also be investigated, and all the the perpetrators involved to be brought to book. Thank you.
Akem Kelvin Nkwine, Human Rights Officer of the Center for Human Rights and Democracy in Africa, speaking there, will bring to you greater details of that report in subsequent news editions. In the meantime, we'll talk about another problem that is further compounding the living conditions of inhabitants of Limbe, the southwest region of the Republic of Cameroon. This is a problem that is almost fast becoming permanent across the Republic of Cameroon, from the big cities to the hinterlands. Inadequate water supply is a major problem to the population. Our correspondent in Limbe, David Sinmaimo, reports on the situation in that part of the southwest region.
The seaside resort city of Limbe is undoubtedly among the few cities or towns in Cameroon still running public taps. Inadequate and regular flow of potable drinking water remains a serious issue, despite being blessed with so many streams and rivers. The taps are crowded with containers each time water flows.
It's not been consistent. We have been having crisis, sometimes 2 days before the water comes back. We're having serious crisis with water.
Denizens trek considerable distances, some using motorbikes and vehicles in search of this precious liquid.
Some places have water. Actually, about, I don't know, about 2 weeks now.
City dwellers say the situation was made worse during Shan.
They have to block water and send all the water to the stadium. All the water has to go to the stadium before, after the channel for have water. People can have water.
Every effort for this reporter to get to an official in charge of water distribution met with bottlenecks. Nonetheless, to curb the situation, the well-to-do have embarked on drilling of boreholes, which they equally assist nearby communities.
You can see from distance, right down there, people coming from with containers far away, for more than 1 kilometer, just to come and carry water here. So a volunteer like this person who has been helping us here, who has decided to help the community here, we don't know how to thank him.
Subdivisional councils are to engage in the putting in place of public boreholes within some neighborhood to salvage the situation. Added to this, the mayor to the Limbe 2 Council, Chief Ndivewuka Daniel I, is fine-tuning a project to develop some water project scheme within his municipality. Water engineers say the city of Limbe is not supposed to have water crisis, given that there is abundant flow of natural water that could be harnessed with the cheapest cost, as the topography provides for free atmospheric pressure in the distribution process.
There are fears of a possible electric energy supply shortage in several parts of the Republic of Cameroon if inhabitants of Afanoyoa in the Yaoundé 3 subdivision are not compensated for power to be transported into Yaoundé from the Memvele Dam. The inhabitants of Afanoyoa have blocked construction works on grounds that they were denied their rights, and they are saying that construction works will not continue if they are not compensated. Smanjik and Gabriel report.
Inhabitants of Afanoyo say no work will continue if they are not compensated. No compensation, no work. According to them, they were fooled in the ongoing construction work to transport electricity from Memvele Dam to Yaoundé. Where this hole is found, it is my land. I used to have a cocoa farm here. That was what I used to take care of my 3 kids. Look at the house of a Cameroonian citizen in Yaoundé after they come and destroy without compensation. After suffering from many damages, the victims are in desperate need to be compensated.
J'ai 3 maisons.
I have 3 houses here. They want to remove us. Where are we going to stay? No compensation, no work.
Passer en haut de nos maisons.
We used to have a medicinal plant here. Unfortunately, due to the ongoing work, all have been destroyed. I am a widow. I have children to feed. No payment, I will die.
Les avocats, tout, plus de 500 mètres carrés.
For their voices to be heard, the victims suffering after the land were seized block ongoing construction work, forcing the project manager to descend to the field. The PM has given me instructions to accelerate your payment. The money is already available. Immediately the order is out, I will pay all of you. We need your indulgence, but before the electricity line passes, you will have your money.
Avant que la vraie ligne passe, vous serez déjà indemnisé. Mais il faut commencer par mettre les pylônes.
The population, after listening to the project coordinator, say they have been so patient waiting for their compensation.
2 mois c'est trop, je peux mourir.
2 months is too much. To say that the pipes will pass before paying us, I say no.
Avant de nous payer, je dis non. Mon frère.
The head of the project will further tell the population that if the energy from Mbele does not reach Yaoundé by June, Cameroon will be in darkness. Before Afanoyo 2 in Yaoundé 3 subdivision, it was the population of Konzok at Nsimalen who protested to demand for them to be compensated. We stopped the transportation of electricity supply from Yambezang in the south to Yaoundé in the central region.
Craftsmen in the west region of the Republic of Cameroon say the COVID-19 pandemic, the exportation of quality raw materials and non-consumption of homemade craft products are factors that enhancing or better still contributing to the death of the craft sector in that part of the country. They were speaking during the inauguration of the craft center of the region, and that center was inaugurated 11 years after the foundation stone was laid. Innocent reports.
The West Handicraft Center finally witnessed its inauguration 11 years after its foundation stone was laid. This structure that swallowed the sum of about 7 million francs CFA had its realization deadline extended several times.
Avec l'inauguration du village artisanal régional de Bafoussam aujourd'hui,
despite the delay to construct this handicraft center, there is need to express delight because the center will allow enough room for the diverse communities in the West region to expose and showcase their cultural treasures and results of their craftsmanship.
Dispose de trésors artisanaux et culturels.
It will also serve as a tourist attraction.
Des visiteurs, des touristes viendront à la rencontre du riche patrimoine artistique et culturel des peuples de Grassfield.
Opening of this center happens at a time when the COVID-19 pandemic has adversely impacted growth of the craft sector in the West region. Craft works have also been hampered by the exportation of raw materials to foreigners, while the local population barely struggle to produce a few.
Le bois que nous travaillons ici n'est pas toujours d'une bonne qualité puisque
the wood species we use is not of good quality. Quality ones are fair and exported. We consume, if not second, then a third grade, whereas priority should have been ours.
Être d'abord utilisé ici. Le plus grand problème c'est
the greatest problem we face is that handicraft is not honored to a high level in our country. The University of Boza was created, but unfortunately, training goes on without practicals on the handicraft.
Ils se forment sur quoi? Ils se forment sur quelle base? Ils ont seulement les diplômes.
Wishes of the craftsmen are that exportation should stop, importation kept aside, consumption of homemade products should be encouraged.
Pour notre secteur, il faut d'abord première des choses, des trucs importés. Qu'on met d'abord ça à côté. Qu'on consomme nos produits nationaux.
This, according to the craftsmen, will develop the handicraft sector.
Is disability inability? If before now your answer was yes, I'm pretty sure your answer is going to be no after you would have watched this report, in which we're bringing to you the fascinating story of two individuals with visual disabilities who have been living together as husband and wife in Penja in the Mungo Division Littoral region of Cameroon. Details in this report compiled by Fomi Armstrong Sanda.
He is called Joseph, popularly known as Major, and the lady is Miriam. They are both visually impaired who have found love in each other. We have decided to love ourselves despite our physical challenges. We truly love each other. That is why we are here at the council. We also want the world to know that physically challenged people are not people to be rejected. Before meeting Miriam, the apple of his eyes, Joseph, who was not born blind, had a sad experience in different marriages. The two women reportedly took advantage of his physical disability to misbehave. His civil union with Miriam brought together a mammoth crowd of curious Cameroonians to the Njombe Penja Council Hall and later to the Église Évangélique du Cameroun, Penja, in the Mungo Division of the Littoral region of Cameroon. It is a wonderful thing. We at the council came out positively to show to the physically challenged that they too have a pride of place at the council. I plead on the government to do something for this couple. It is a good example. It's the couple of the year. Life is, however, not rosy to the couple whose petty business suffers serious setbacks because of dishonest Cameroonians who dupe them on daily basis.
Thanks to me, Armstrong Sander, for that report. Now, out of Cameroon, gunmen have reportedly killed at least 13 people in an attack on a school in the northwestern part of Nigeria, or Nigeria's state of Zamfara. Witnesses said dozens of armed men arrived on motorbikes and opened fire. They also stole cattle. Last year, nearly 300 girls were taken from a school in Zamfara state. They were later released, and of course that was recently. And kidnapping and killings are increasing in northwestern Nigeria. Authorities in Kaduna state have released a report saying nearly 2,000 people in the state were killed or abducted by criminal gangs last year. And in South Africa, police is now investigating the killing of a bystander during a protest of university students in Johannesburg. The victim was shot while coming out of a clinic, and he reportedly died on the spot. South Africa's police minister, Bekkie Cele, has said there is no explanation to the killing. He adds that someone went crazy during the protest in Johannesburg, leading to the shooting. According to the minister, accusations of police excesses when dealing with black populations were becoming difficult to defend. And that's it for the first part of this newscast. Talking Point is up next. Thank you for joining us in Talking Point. We are receiving Sir Mutaga Silvanus Tifu, who is the special advisor, one of the special advisors of the Cameroon Renaissance Movement, CRM political party, and its national president, Professor Maurice Kamto. Thanks for joining us today.
Thank you so much, Mr. Babula Jonathan, and thanks immensely to the technical team of Equinoxe TV for the wonderful job they have been doing, especially to place on air most of the fine brains of our nation.
Right, we begin with some issues concerning human rights violations and abuse in the northwest and southwest regions of the country. The Center for Human Rights and Democracy in Africa has documented a series of atrocities committed against civilians by both non-state armed groups on one hand, and on the other hand, the state security and defense forces. As a politician, what's your reading of the situation in those two regions with the continuous violations and abuse of human rights?
Mr. Babula Jonathan, I think the CRM, through the National Secretary in charge of human rights, Mr. Sikati Desire, last week published a similar report concerning human rights abuses in the nation. So they were duly documented. What I want to say with regards to the situation in the northwest and southwest region is that the international community has to press on their buttons harder than they used to do in the previous years, because we cannot be talking of the situation ameliorating when we know that human lives are lost on a daily basis. So what I want to say is,
yesterday the town of Bamenda was quite hot. Gunshots in several parts of the town, around Travelers Hospital roundabout and other areas. The whole town was not the whole town, some parts were under serious gunshots throughout a greater portion of the day.
Mr. Babula Jonathan, it is as a result of the war ongoing in the northwest region. We told the press last time that the regime in place, the Bia's regime, is bent on winning that war. And we of the CRM political party think that it's not a war that has to be won through the military option. We've been advocating for ceasefire and for negotiation, especially with the separatist leaders, and subsequent dialogue. So we cannot keep on maybe with our pride and think that that war has to be won. Yes, it's true that the issue of the regional elections have come and gone, and people think that it's something that could have come up to maybe bring salvation to the plight of the Anglophone people, but you can find it that they are not very satisfied, because they know that the regional councils and all the like are still under the control of the central government, which is made of the CPDM chief whips and all the like. So with the elections that were even carried out in the northwest and southwest region, while people are still hiding in bushes and others are still in Nigeria, others are even out of the continent in the United States of America. You saw just a week ago, the U.S. I think 2 weeks ago, the U.S. congressmen were against a motion of repatriation of our citizens who are in the United States of America, because the situation on ground in Cameroon is not still stable. So to tell someone that there is calm in the northwest and southwest region, I think it is a lie from the pit of hell. Today, all stakeholders, political actors and all the like would want to come in, but we don't still know whether the regime in place, which is made of the CPDM, 90% in the parliament and 90% in the Senate, and even above 90%, 100% controlling the decentralized bodies, would they be ready to open the door for other people to come in? That is the question. You know, we are in a country in which the ruling CPDM in place is ruling the country as if it was borrowed just to them, maybe on hire. They hired it to them to handle the country. So today I cannot really hold my peace, because when I see people dying on daily basis in the northwest and southwest region, the military are dying, the police officers are dying, the gendarmes are dying, and civilians are dying on daily basis, and we keep on saying now the situation is under control. I think this is not really good for our nation. So much blood has been spilled. It is still flowing. It's not good.
Is the problem all about CPDM? Because yes, the 10 regions are headed by CPDM militants, but there are other decentralized bodies that are not under the control of the CPDM. Even at the top, is the problem all about CPDM?
Mr. Babla Jonathan, you accept with me that solving the Anglophone crisis or ending the war in the Northwest region, it will emanate from a political decision. And the President of the Republic of Cameroon has all the powers to do that. That's why Professor Maurice Kamto said in 2018 that if he were elected, should in case Cameroonians honor him to occupy the prestigious post of the President of the Republic, the very first thing that he would do as a president, because he has all the powers that has been conferred to him by the people of Cameroon, was to see into the problems of the Anglophones. So like I told you, to think that the situation in the Northwest region, because it's not a situation that is affecting other parts of the country, is not a situation that has to be looked into it. I want to tell you that it's not really true. Other people, there are other decentralized bodies, as you said, but I want to tell you that looking at the composition of the glamorous regionalization, decentralization, you find that all the 10 mayors of the city councils in place, they are made of the CPDM militants. They refused the consensual reform of the electoral system because they didn't want to open a transparent door for other political parties to come in. That is why you see that they had to pick some of our militants like Professor Alain Foguet, Mr. Bibum Isaac, you have Zambwe Pascal, Solomon Bias and others who are still in prison, kept them there. Okay, now they have finished organizing their so-called sham of regional elections. Why are they still keeping our militants in prison? That is the question right now.
Why do you call the regional elections sham? Why do you refer to it as a failure?
It's a whole sham because months later, people thought that it was going to be the panacea. It was like that magic stick that would be used maybe just to calm down the tension in the Anglophone regions, but you still find it tripled.
But the regional officials are just getting to work, and some of them, like the Northwest Regional President or the President of the Northwest Regional Assembly, Professor Ngwafo, will tell you that it's progressive. It's not like a magic bullet, a magic stuff will just bring the solution in a twinkle of an eye.
He says it's progressive. I think those are the words of a politician that wants to protect a regime in place. When they talk of administrative decisions, that there are certain administrative decisions which need urgent measures. They say desperate situations trigger desperate measures. We expect that it is a desperate situation going on in those two Anglophone regions. So the acceleration of the process of decentralization has to be of paramount interest to the regime in place. It is not progressive. If they are telling us that it's progressive, and I think that they are telling us that progressively the war will be ending in 10 years' time, which is not true. We want that war to end. If they find that that decentralization of a thing will not work, why not open way for federalism, which is highly clamored for by other political parties? But the most important thing is the consensual reform of the electoral code, so that Cameroon is a democratic country, like Mr. Biya said. President Biya said that he will want to be remembered as a person who brought democracy in Cameroon. But this is not democracy. You find that Cameroonians are not free even to go into the street and protest, to revindicate, especially with regards to major grievances that are affecting, or of things that are affecting them. If you look at those in prison, the Anglophones in prison, they came out in 2016 for a protest because of the bad roads in the Northwest and Southwest. In a democratic country where there is freedom of expression, those things are inscribed in our constitution, Article 45. They are treaties that are duly ratified by Cameroon, but we find that those things end in paper, and here in Cameroon they tell of democracy. I think we are in a dictatorship, Mr. Babla Jonathan.
Let's talk about the leaders and militants of the CRM who are in detention. What's happening with Professor Alain Foguet, Bibu Nisak, and others?
It is regrettable because these are people who were arrested before the march past. That's the protest march on the 22nd of September 2020. Professor Alain Foguet was arrested just because he went to the president-elect's residence to calm down tension that was boiling up between some group of individuals who went there to violate the residence of Professor Kamto. So Mr. Bibu Nisak was arrested at his residence. He was not even out on the 22nd for the protest march. This other guy, the secretary in charge of implantation and inspection of the party, Mr. Zambwe Pascal, he himself was arrested in Douala. A good number of others. There is a case with one of our militants at the new central prison. You find that that guy had a problem with his employer. The employer had to use the protest march on the 22nd of September as a means to settle scores. So he was arrested by the gendarme, locked up, and then later released. His employer took him up and they paid for him to be locked up. On the 10th of March, Mr.
How can you prove that his detention is being masterminded by his employer and not because of the political demonstrations?
The issue here is that even while he goes to court, you find that there are still what they call investigators, those civilians, policemen. They are still sent there. It's in violation. The other day I was at the court of the High Court, the Littoral Court, the High Court of Littoral. You find that why that guy was there with Maître Fabien Kenye. Maître Fabien Kenye was briefing the militants on how they have to answer certain charges at the court. You can imagine that a police officer violated all protocol, came in and infringed the briefing between the lawyer and his clients. You find that it was only that guy that had to spot. I said, oh, this is the same guy that my boss brought, and then they handcuffed me and they took me to the gendarmerie, and I was dumped in the at the New Bay Central Prison. There are evidences to prove it, Mr. Babula Jonathan, and that is the country that we are in. You find that those who are in power, they think they are above the law, and simply because our judiciary department is not completely independent, they still have the executive arm of government always imposing on them. They are not free to carry out justice the way they are supposed to do in our country, Mr. Babla. And that is what we of the Cameroon Renaissance Movement, we are completely against. We want a country in which lawyers, want a country in which magistrates and other like will dictate, interpret the law text according to the dictates of their consciences, using all parameters which are duly constituted, either to sentence somebody or to free that person, not because they have any pressure from a government official and whatsoever. If not, they will be sacked, or if not, they will be demoted. If not, they will be transferred to remote areas. We know that for certain. I know.
What exactly are the judicial or administrative authorities saying about the reasons for their detention?
Mr. Babula Jonathan, I want to take my case for one. While we were at the Kondenge Central Prison, no, our case had almost about 21 adjournments. So why at the courts of at the High Court, the full High Court in Yaoundé, most of those judges, after due pleadings by our lawyers, would tell our lawyers behind that we know that what you are saying, these guys are innocent, but we cannot do anything. You know, this is a political case. So if you are talking of the case of Professor Alain Foguet, Mr. Bibu Nisak and the rest, it does not depend on the lawyers. It depends on the political will of those who have arrested them and dumped them in prison. If they decide that, okay, they have to leave today, they will leave. But our lawyers are doing their work. They are professionals, and the party is doing everything possible. We are disbursing money every day on daily basis. When the lawyers, their dues are paid, you can imagine this is a calculated ploy to cause the CRM to spend maybe every bit of franc that is in their coffers behind cases in court today, tomorrow, and several adjournments.
Yesterday you were at the Wuri High Court. What happened there?
At the Wuri High Court yesterday, we were there with about 6 lawyers led by the barrister Fabien Kenye and several other militants who came there to support the 24 that were supposed to appear. I think after due hearings in the court, the case is adjourned to the 17th of this month for final readings. So we expect that the verdict would be a good one if these people don't have any pressure from the regime in place to still continue keeping our boys who are at the New Bay Central Prison. But if there is pressure, because maybe they want the CRM to compromise, they don't want the CRM to continue pounding that the injustice in our nation must stop. There should be a consensual reform of the electoral code, because that is the only thing they want to be wasting our time struggling to see how they can divide the CRM, completely destroy it as it has been done to other political parties. But like I tell you, the Cameroon people are there to judge. History will judge all of us, because what we want to, Mutaga is not CRM. I love other political parties because they did not follow the vision which we had. We want to live a nation which our children will be proud of us, that our parents fought. We are talking today of the Omebe, we talk of the Ines Wanje and other like. They fought and stopped somewhere. Others have to continue. But it is regrettable that those who are still against the struggle of the total liberation of Cameroon are Cameroonians themselves. Because I don't know why, after about 50 years of independence, look at the vaccine. Last time we saw the Minister of Scientific Research brandishing on a television platform that there was money that they disbursed money for research and other like, and finally you heard everything died down. You find the other day there was a cacophony when I heard something came out from
the drugs that have been produced by Cameroon, notably within the framework of the fight against coronavirus, but away from that, about the issue of struggling for a better Cameroon, struggling to save Cameroon from the plethora of political, economic and social problems affecting the country and her people. What is the next step that you at the level of the CRM political party are planning to take after the protests that you organized, orchestrated in some towns of the country twice? And what's the next step? Is that all about the struggle? Where will you continue next?
Mr. Babula Jonathan, a political party is created to ascend right up to the supreme magistracy of the nation, to conquer power. Marches are just part of the activities of a political party. The CRM has demonstrated out of good faith to all, before the very naked eyes of all Cameroonians, that they have a genuine will of effecting change in our nation. So many of us think that the CRM would have to be pressing hard for the Anglophone crisis to come to an end. We'll be pressing hard for the reform, consensual reform of the electoral code. With that, we have other parameters. You know, we are in the modern age that politics has other things that have to be done. I think the diplomatic aspect of it, we need to mutualize our effort. The president of the Cameroon Renaissance Movement, His Excellency Maurice Kamto, just made a call last time to all other political actors of the opposition for them to mutualize their energies for the consensual reform of the electoral code system. But it's regrettable. We only hope that it will be done. You know, when you are in a country like Cameroon, that opposition leaders, parties are just created not just because they have any genuine will to ascend to power, but just because they want to legitimize the false concept of democracy in Cameroon. You know, it's a Herculean task. It is a tedious task for the genuine political parties maybe to break out, because others will be there like detractors and other like, and will tell you that the electoral system is not the necessary thing that has to be done now. You only need to ask your militants to go and register and vote. Remember, that voting has been done. In as much as in 2018, millions voted for the Cameroon Renaissance Movement candidate for the presidential elections, but the elections, what was the result? They were rigged. So because of the electoral system that was not very favorable for the genuine verdict or results that came out from the polls to be proclaimed, so that there should be general jubilation all over Cameroon. I can remember after the
election organizing body Elections Cameroon is already undertaking some move with its regional branches in view of a review of the electoral code of the country. Sir Mutaga Silvanus Tifu, special advisor of the CRM political party and its national president, Professor Maurice Kamto, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you so much, Mr. Babula Jonathan. Let me greet His President, His Excellency, Professor Maurice Kamto, and my very good friend, Mr. Ngo Vites, and His Royal Highness von Aben Henry Aben of Kruku Village watching this program.
Thanks, ladies and gentlemen, for staying with us. Equinoxe is up next.